In 3-blind, we handle parity using pseudo swap. That relies on doing CEEC though, which doesn't work well for multi, since when we're using rooms, we want to memo and execute in the same order. So in multi, you should do ECEC and handle parity using weak swap instead. Weak swap is like pseudo swap, but it works even if we don't know whether we have parity. It does only work with adjacent buffers like UF and UFR, so if you're still using M2OP or something, just do a parity alg between edges and corners, it's fine. If you do use UF/UFR though, you should really use weak swap, so here's how it works. Start tracing from UF, like normal, and then when you hit either the UF or UR piece, solve it to UR and continue. So for both of these scrambles, we'd shoot to UL, and then to FR, and then to RU. It doesn't matter which one out of UF or UR we hit first. With weak swap, we treat them the exact same way. And we're shooting to RU here rather than UR because we traced from the other side of the piece, right? It's just like if we were pseudo swapping in 3-blind. We need to shoot to whichever side makes the most sense. After that, we just keep tracing like normal, so here, here. And when we hit the second piece out of UF and UR, so in this case the UR piece, we might have edges left, like these two. In which case we just cycle break, pretty obvious. So like here, here, here. And then when we're done tracing all of our targets, two things can happen. We'll either have an even number of targets, in which case we're done, like on the scramble. Or we could have an odd number of targets, in which case we'll just shoot from our last target to UR, specifically this UR sticker, and then we're done and can move on to corners. So to recap, when you hit UF or UR, solve it to UR. When you hit the other one, treat it as your buffer and cycle break if you need to. And when you finish tracing, if you have an odd number of targets, shoot to UR at the end. And that's basically everything you need to know, and pretty much every case you can encounter is just an extension of those 3 basic steps. There are a couple of niche cases where the correct approach might not be like 100% obvious, so here's how those work. On some scrambles, the UF or the UR piece will already be solved in the UR spot before we even start tracing. When that happens, we just treat it as if that was the first piece we hit. So we start tracing, here, here, and when we get to the other one, we're not going to solve it to UR, since that would kick out a solved piece, or pseudo-solved piece in this case. Instead, we just treat it like our buffer and cycle break if we need to. So I might cycle break here or something and continue. On the other hand, sometimes we'll get scrambles like this, where either the UF or UR piece is flipped in that spot. When that happens, just treat it as if it's any other unsolved piece. So start tracing, here, here, and when we hit the other piece, now this is our first piece, and we do solve it to UR. And then if we have any edges left, which we have plenty here, we just cycle break, because now we've hit that second piece. So on this scramble, I'd go here, here, up here, and then cycle break to here or something, or probably somewhere else, but anyway, cycle break and then continue. Sometimes that'll be a bit weird, like on this scramble. We'd trace here, 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 and then we're saying this is unsolved, so we should shoot to RU. But then everything else is solved, so we have nowhere to cycle break, and we have an odd number of targets, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When we have an odd number of targets, we're meant to shoot to the UR sticker at the end, but that would make our last alg RU to UR, which seems wrong, right? That's not a 3 cycle. But the thing is, shooting from RU to UR just means flipping the UR piece, so really our last edge alg on that scramble is just going to be this 2 flip. Now you can memo that however you like, whether that's a letter pair, which with specs would be MB, or you have some other way to memorize flips. I'd personally just use a letter pair for consistency with the other rules of weak swap, but yeah, you can do it however you like, it's just a 2 flip. When we have an even number of flips, like this 2 flip here, they don't affect anything else. So we can trace all the rest of our edges using weak swap, and then shoot to UR at the end if we need to, and then just solve these edges however we'd like, whether that's using a 2 flip alg or something else. When we have an odd number of flips though, like this single flip here, we need to be careful since there's no way to flip just one edge, so it's going to affect something else. Now if you have an even number of targets, like 1, 2, 3, 4, you can just trace normally and you'll effectively be left with a case like this at the end of the solve, where you can just flip that edge with your buffer. That's normal, and you should know how to handle that just fine. Where people get into trouble though, is where they have an odd number of flips and an odd number of targets, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 targets, and 1 flip. if we apply the previous approach and flip this edge with our buffer, we'll actually end up with this DNF, where UF and UR are flipped. This specific DNF is very common in multi when someone isn't used to weak swap yet, and here's how we avoid it. Trace normally, following the basic weak swap rules, so here, 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 and here for our last target. Then if we get an odd number of targets, like we did here, check to see if we have any edge flips. If we have a single edge flip, we want to break into it. That means we shoot from our last target to one side of the flipped edge, let's say this one, and then to the other side of the flipped edge, and then to UR. And if we had 3 flipped edges or 5 or any other odd number, then we just need to break into one of them, and then we would be left with an even number like we showed before. Let's just show that solution in action, because it's a bit confusing, but we'll see how it works. So here to here, like that, then here to here, and then we're breaking into the flip, so from here to here we said, and then our last alg will just be here to here, and that solves our edges like we want. It doesn't matter how you solve an even number of flips, so if we had more, then you might have a 2 flip or something to solve after that, and that's fine, but that's how you deal with a single or any odd number of flipped edges. And that's everything. It might sound like a lot of specific cases and rules, but trust me, once you start using it, you'll get the hang of it very quickly. It really isn't much harder than normal pseudo swap in 3-blind, and it's really nice to be able to just trace the same way every time and do everything in order. If you do want some examples of using it in action, then I'll have a video linked down in the description with 10 minutes or so of walkthrough solves basically with weak swap. But yeah, just try it out yourself, you'll get the hang of it in no time, and have fun with weak swap.